Hello and welcome to Silicon Slopes Startup Capital. My name is Elizabeth Converse and we are here with State Senator Todd Wyler, as well as the president of the Utah Solar Energy Association, Ryan Evans, talking about renewable energy and the importance of renewable energy in Utah and how it's faring throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to let Senator Wyler go first and introduce yourself and kind of talk to our group about why this is important to you.
All right, thanks. My name is Todd Wyler. I'm a local attorney here. I work downtown Salt Lake with a law firm called Christensen and Jensen. And I've been in the state Senate for about 8.5 years. And as part of what I do in the state Senate, I've been co-chairing the Clean Air Caucus, which is a bipartisan group for about 5 or 6 years. I don't know my exact date on that. And, through my work in the legislature, and especially with the Clean Air Caucus, I've become fairly interested in rebuilding Utah's clean energy workforce. I don't know if anyone saw it. There was a pretty good guest opinion in the Daily Herald back on July 22nd from Stan Lockhart, who's a friend of mine. And I would, if you're interested in this topic, I would definitely refer you to that. But he talked a little bit about Vivint Solar in that article, and also about the fact that America's clean energy workforce totaled 3.3 million workers at the end of 2019, and it was employing about 40% of America's entire energy workforce. Despite adding 100,000 jobs in June of this year, the workforce is still down by over 500,000 or 515,000 jobs since the pandemic or the coronavirus recession hit last March. And that translates to about 3,000 jobs here in Utah alone. In any event, I don't know how long you want me to go, but I wanted to share a couple of talking points and highlights, and tell me if I'm talking too long.
We will get to just 1 second. I want to give Ryan a chance to introduce himself and
sure.
The Solar Energy Association and why it's important.
Great. Hello, everyone. Ryan Evans. I'm the president of Utah Solar Energy Association. I've been doing this for about 4 years now, working for the association, representing the solar market and the solar industry in the state of Utah. Prior to this, I spent 13 years with the Salt Lake Chamber, Utah's largest business association. One of my principal responsibilities there was air quality. Once you start working on air quality policy, that quickly gets you into renewable energy. It became very apparent after a while that the solar industry really didn't have much representation up at the Capitol. They really didn't have someone being a voice for this up and coming clean energy sector for the state of Utah. So working with about 7 or 8 different solar companies back in 2016, we launched the Utah Solar Energy Association. And here I am, I guess 4 years later, work on several different platforms. I also do some work with some clients nationally, but most of a good amount of my time is spent here in Utah on the Solar Association here.
Awesome. So Ryan, can you kind of tell us why renewable energy is so important specifically in Utah?
Sure. We have great opportunity here for renewable energy. Not only is it, we clearly have very abundant sunny weather here. Utah is typically the number 4, number 5 sunniest states in the nation. So, and then we also have elevated land that is, generally speaking, not very utilized. So in other parts of the country, renewable energy can be really tough when you're looking to put in big scale utility farms, solely because they go in typically where either a farm may be, or there's other development there getting in the way of putting in, say, a few hundred megawatts of solar. Here in our desert, we've got wide open land that isn't being used. So we have incredible opportunity there. Not to mention, Utahns are a very prepared and fiscally conservative people here, I think. And so rooftop solar is very attractive for homeowners to be able to do their part for the environment, but also look to save some money down the road by lowering their electricity bills. And again, taking advantage of the sun that's beating down, 300 something days a year here.
So I think Senator Wyler kind of hit on some of how the industry has been affected by the pandemic, but can you speak a little bit more detailed to Utah companies, Utah workers, and what they're going through during this time?
Absolutely. Luckily, most are now starting to get back to work, but business is still a little bit slow. When the pandemic first hit, it was really tough on the solar industry, mainly because the solar industry is a very person-to-person transaction. We, have salespeople that go out and meet with a homeowner, explain to them what it is that they might be purchasing, how much money it will save them, what it will look like on their home. And suddenly that had to shift to a virtual model. There's even, solar companies that still do door-to-door sales. Clearly that wasn't going to be happening. And then to install solar, that was, really not going to happen when people were not comfortable having strange people in their house where they might be transmitting the coronavirus. So it was really rough for quite a while on the, let's call it the rooftop side, utility scale side. So the large scale where we're talking hundreds of megawatts in the desert, for example, that got hit hard as well, but mostly from a distribution challenge. So everything that they would need to install a solar farm would, typically find delays right now just because of extra care and things happening at the manufacturing centers and the distribution centers. But yeah, in the course of the last several months, we have probably lost close to 3,500 jobs in the state of Utah. For Corona, some have gone back to work, as I said. Most companies are back up and running as best they can, but we definitely took a pretty strong hit on the renewable side.
For sure. Senator Wyler, can you talk a little bit about the state's renewable energy goals and how it might be affecting the state's accomplishing of those goals?
Well, I think before let me introduce that by saying, first of all, just about 2 weeks ago, 7 Republican senators in Washington, D.C. sent a letter to Mitch McConnell urging him to consider policies in future COVID-19 relief and recovery proposals that would bolster clean energy sector. So I think that if Congress were to do that, we would certainly be able to tee off of that in the state of Utah. I mean, we have local businesses like I already mentioned Vivint that are, I think, leaders in this industry. But I'm not sure how much the government, in terms of the state of Utah government, is doing. But I know that Senator Murkowski has been pushing, along with others, Tom Tillis, who's from North Carolina, and Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins from Maine, and others. They're looking to boost jobs and innovation with the renewables, carbon capture, nuclear, energy efficiency, and transportation storage sectors. And they're making the case that it's fiscally prudent to do so. Senator Romney, Mitt Romney, was not on the letter, but he is a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus and has been a champion for our energy workforce and the multiplier effect that clean energy jobs have on our economy. And so I do believe that we're at a turning point in our country, that millions of clean energy workers are ready, willing, and able to find out if Washington, D.C. will stand behind this industry and support families and economies and strengthen our national security. Like I said, over 18% of the 3.3 million clean energy workforce has been laid off just since March of this year. And I think it would make a big difference if Washington, D.C. stepped up and backed this industry. The job growth in clean energy has outpaced the U.S. economy by 70% over the past 5 years. And it's grown twice as fast as the overall U.S. economy since 2017. I think, as a Republican myself, I'm glad to see that Republican leaders in the U.S. Senate recognize that good policies are inclusive. So in any event, I think that I'm sure that there's more that we can do on the state level. I know Representative Melissa Ballard, who's relatively new to the legislature, she's been really pushing hydrogen and hydrogen storage capacities and hydrogen as an alternative energy source. In fact, that's all she talks about sometimes is hydrogen. And I know she's really excited and is, I think she's going to be running some legislation on that next year.
Wonderful. So a lot of tech companies here in Utah have made commitments, especially our data centers, of which we have a lot more than I think people realize, to be 100% on renewable energy. Is the state doing anything, and Ryan or Senator Wyler, either one of you can answer this, is the state doing anything to help these companies achieve that goal?
I'll defer to Ryan on that.
Thank you. I will answer that broadly. I don't think we've done enough for corporate customers. And I say that because in other states, you have the ability to negotiate you can do what's called a power purchase agreement in other states, where if you are a large tech data center, for example, and you want to purchase a significant block of renewable energy, you don't have the space on your building or around your facility to put it in yourself. And so in other states, you actually have the ability to approach a developer who's putting it in, and you'll buy a certain amount of the production of a solar farm somewhere. In Utah, it's really, you have to negotiate with Rocky Mountain Power. And so for corporate, especially for larger corporate clients, like a data center where Facebook I think Facebook became the second corporate customer in Utah that was actually able to use one of our renewable energy tariffs for large energy purchases for a business. And it's done that way because it's not a great tariff. They need to fix the rate schedule for that. There's some challenges there that I truly can't recall where some of the significant issues are. But again, in other states, you've got the ability just to go out and work with a developer. Here you have to negotiate and work with Rocky Mountain Power. And my hope is that because Rocky Mountain Power is investing much more in renewables now, because their customers are saying, hey, we want to see more renewables here, and the cost of renewables is very, very cheap compared to what it was just 10 years ago, that I think we'll see some other opportunities open up just because Rocky will be investing so much in utility scale solar. And if I could just add one quick little point on to what Senator Wyler mentioned about Congress, I think one really great aspect of the renewable energy world right now is the ability to put people back to work quickly. With a little certainty from Washington, D.C. in terms of protecting the investment tax credit, or just doing an extension of the investment tax credit and monetizing that credit. I think the solar industry in particular, that's just the side that I know better, but I think we would have the ability to put hundreds of thousands of people back to work if we could just get some certainty out of Washington, D.C. And it's great to see that it's becoming a lot more bipartisan in what they're trying to get done at the federal level.
For sure. Certainty in Washington is not something that we often see for the past, I don't know how long since I've been alive. So what's going on at the state level? You mentioned that most of these organizations have to work with Rocky Mountain Power, which we've seen a huge shift in Rocky Mountain Power's priorities over the past several years, which I think in big part is thanks to your work. But what can companies do? What can tech companies specifically do in state to help kind of push that along?
Well, I think our general philosophy as a legislature is we want to keep taxes low, especially corporate taxes low, and keep regulation at a reasonable level so that, businessmen and businesswomen can do what they do best. I mean, I think what I've seen in my 8.5 years is let's keep government out of the way and let businesses organically grow and prosper on their own. I know with solar and Rocky Mountain Power, we had a couple of contentious bills. I think that the net metering issue kind of got settled, but just to, I don't want to sound condescending, but just it's easier for me to sometimes talk about that issue with by comparing zucchini rather than solar power, because everybody understands about this time of the year, all of your neighbors have zucchini to give away. And I'm not a big fan of zucchini, but my wife makes some pretty good cake with it, or bread or whatever. But I've often said that the loneliest person in Utah is the one that has to grow their own zucchini. But the fact of the matter is this time of year, everyone's got zucchini coming out of their ears, but in February and March and April, they don't. And that's kind of that supply and demand is kind of the issue we had to deal with the legislature, because all of these people that had paid to install solar panels on their roofs, they wanted to force Rocky Mountain Power to buy their excess energy back from them in the months when Rocky Mountain Power didn't need it, or they wanted to get credits. And then in July, like it's been 100 degrees the last week, they want to cash in those credits when Rocky Mountain Power is having to go out on the private market and pay a premium for the extra power to keep everybody's air conditioners running. And so we had 2 or 3 or 4, even 5 years of debate where the homeowners were trying to push us to force Rocky Mountain Power to be more favorable to them. And Rocky Mountain Power was coming up through their lobbyists and basically saying, look, we don't really need these extra, these extra units of power. And when the people want to sell it to us or trade it to us, but then what we really don't want is to buy it at a rate and then have to resell them or give them power, when everybody's trying to run their air conditioners when it's 105 degrees and so outside. And so I do think we struck a balance there. I remember we passed some legislation that was called the STEP program. And it was one of those split the baby compromises where not everyone was happy. But I think that we got to a place where Rocky Mountain Power could continue doing what it's doing, and homeowners, they could try to, cash in or at least break even on their investments for solar power. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we try to, as a legislature, we try to stay out of business's way, except in cases like this where Rocky Mountain Power is a natural monopoly or a regulated monopoly. We did have to kind of step in and put our fingers on the scales. But I think the preference is that we just stay out of the way and let businesses do what they do best.
Ryan, do you want to kind of talk to that point a little?
Yeah, I would, I'd just take a few minutes to also just update what the senator said, in the sense that we actually don't have it settled.
Okay. I thought we had it settled.
You'd think, but it goes on forever and ever and ever. And it's this, unfortunately, it's a very, very different world when you're talking regulatory policy than public policy, I found. I like public policy a lot better. I feel like you can manipulate the sausage better to make everybody happy. Regulatory policy takes years and years and years. It's crazy at times. However, we will have that docket, and we will have that issue fixed, Senator, as of the end of October of this year.
Wonderful.
We've been working with, obviously, each side has their own take on what the value of solar is, and that's what it breaks down to. Not that necessarily a solar customer has to receive a one-to-one credit for their energy bill, but it's really what's the value of that solar energy that's being put back on the grid. What's the value to Rocky? What does Rocky turn around and sell it for? And so it's tricky. It's, there's a lot of deliverables from that solar power that aren't always taken into account. And that's the role of the Public Service Commission, is to look at that and analyze that and break it down a little bit better. In terms of what can we do here, I think that in Utah, I think we can try to get out of the way a little bit more and give businesses more options. I completely agree. I think it's great when we provide some certainty into the market, allow business just to do business, do what they do, invest their capital. And, renewable energy is bringing hundreds of millions of dollars of capital to this state and growing jobs. I mean, we were the fastest growing industry for a little while in the state of Utah. So there's really good opportunity there. I think that the most important thing is to make sure that we just, hold our monopoly utility, make sure that they understand the state's priorities for job growth and capital investment.
Definitely. I think that's completely on point for what we need to do moving forward. So as I understand it, companies like Facebook and eBay, who have those big data centers, companies or different organizations throughout the state that have these huge buildings and house enormous facilities to do a ton of work. Right now, their only option is to go through Rocky Mountain Power. Is that correct?
That's correct. They could put their own on.
Okay.
But typically, a data center like that won't be able to put on enough that's going to significantly reduce their energy consumption. And most often when it's a business, they're not necessarily even looking for the return to what they're going to sell it back to the grid for. They just want to be able to use that on-site energy and reduction of their electrical use during the day, because that's when people are there and they're working, and that's when the sun's doing its job.
For sure. And how does that impact our general health and wellness? We have these giant companies, we have the individual families who are utilizing solar, but how is that impacting the state as a whole?
Solar, it depends on who you talk to in terms of its benefit for air quality. And the senator knows this very well, that it's not always the most beneficial in terms of emissions reductions, if that's the angle that we want to talk about with air quality. However, when you start to look at all of the solar that we have throughout the state, And then the typical, you see often, I think it's about 50% of the people that have electric vehicles also have solar. And so they're starting to take their entire package of electrical use and emissions generation and actually starting to reduce it on their own because they're powering their vehicles with solar at night. I think energy storage is going to be a really significant benefit to that, so that you don't even have to pump it back out into the grid. You can just keep your energy. Therefore, you can take your own home down to very, very low emissions. You just, start improving air quality one step at a time. And I think electric vehicles is really the key there. And why not let solar power those vehicles while they're sitting at the place of employment all day, for example?
Definitely, that's a great understanding of that. So what's going on at the state level? What can we do at the state level to help push these priorities forward, or to really address this issue a little bit more aggressively? It's definitely a pandemic, and it's hard to do much face to face or reaching out or meeting new people, but we definitely have our computers, as you can see here. So
Yes.
what can we do now?
Well, I think the best thing that you can do is get to know your state legislator if you don't already. I'm always preaching that, because so many people, they wait until February or even March when the session is ongoing, and I'm the busiest days of my life for the last 2 weeks of the session. I don't even have time to go to the bathroom, much less return 5 or 6 voicemail messages. So I think it's important that that you get to know who your state legislators are. We have incredible turnover every 2 years. People don't realize that, but when we start in January for our next session, we'll be at least 18 and maybe 20 new members that weren't there last January. And people kind of have this vision in their mind that we have these state legislators and they just stay there forever. And while I have been there for a while, we have a guy that was elected 2 years ago that he's done. He didn't file for re-election and he'll be gone next year. So we do have some pretty incredible turnover. And so, you can just Google who represents me, Utah, and put in your address and see that. I think it's also, it's not a bad idea to send a small donation to someone and say, hey, I work in this industry and I hope you'll consider me a voice of reason when you're considering legislation that affects, X, Y, or Z. But what I'm trying to say is, regardless of whether you make a donation or not, I think it's important that your state lawmakers know who you are. So if you do need to contact them during the session, you're a recognizable name, you're a familiar voice, and you're someone that they'll listen to. I read all of my emails and respond to most of them. And I say most of them because a lot of the emails I get are to all 104 legislators. So if it's not from my constituent, I don't necessarily feel obligated to respond. But, and also, if you know that there's a particular issue that's going to be coming, and one way you can know what issues are coming is and this is kind of cool, we have our Clean Air Caucuses pretty much every third Tuesday throughout the year. So we'll be doing one the third Tuesday in August. I think that's August 18th, if I'm not mistaken. And we're now, because of COVID, we're now doing them on Zoom. So you used to have to go up to the Capitol and we would feed you free pizza to listen to us. But now you can just tune in. So if you're interested, if anybody's listening, you can join or apply to join a Facebook group called Utah Clean Air Caucus. It's just on Facebook. Just type in those words. I'll admit you as a member. And then what we do is very similar to this. We hold our caucus on Zoom, and then we Facebook Live it into that group. Again, the group is called Utah Clean Air Caucus. And then once we've had those meetings, they usually last about an hour and a half. Then they're preserved there in that Facebook group. So if you miss it, you can go back a week later or a month later and watch it. In fact, our last 2 or 3 meetings are on that site right now. So just by listening to the presentations, we have a lot of experts throughout the state. We have a lot of advocacy groups. We usually have Bryce Bird, who's with the state itself with the air quality division, give us an update. We have Tom Carter from UCARE. So there's a lot of great information. Some of it's a little bit wonky, and gets into the details. I'm more of a big picture guy myself, but those are a few suggestions.
And if I could echo on that, I just want to give props to the Clean Air Caucus and to Senator Wyler for his leadership there. I've been a part of that group many times over the years, not for a little while. I certainly have not participated via Zoom, via Facebook group, but I might have to jump back in. But between the work of that group and UCare and a few other groups around the state, a lot of really good work is getting done. And I just want to thank the senator for that, because I remember maybe 10 years ago, it was a hard conversation to have up at the Capitol. And there was also just concern that did legislators know enough, and did they want to learn about air quality? And I always felt they did. And sure enough, you start to see the groups pop up of legislators, and they start bringing bills to the floor. And we've seen some incredible investment and some incredible change from our state capitol towards improving air quality in the state of Utah. So I felt I needed to say that and to recognize a job well done.
Well, thanks. And one thing I want to add is 9 years ago, when I started my tenure in the Utah Senate, 8.5 years ago, when I would talk about air quality, other Republicans would look at me like, what are you talking about? And that's completely changed. Republicans in Utah have really jumped on the clean air bandwagon. And a lot of that's because, when we survey people about the most important issues in the state, air quality is now always in the top 5 and often in the top 3. And that just wasn't the case 10 years ago. And the most ironic thing about that, to me, and people get mad every time I say this, but our air today, in 2020, is cleaner than it's been at any time in the last probably 60 years, since 1960. And it's been getting cleaner every year for over 10 years now, probably closer to 20 years now. It'll be cleaner next year than it is this year. And a lot of that's because of federal regulations and the reforms the refineries have to make. But a lot of it's also because our fuel has less lead in it, and our cars are burning a lot cleaner now. But it's just ironic to me that in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, when Utah's air was really, really dirty, people weren't paying attention. But now in the 2010s, up until today, when our air really is significantly cleaner than it was 20 or 30 years ago, now people are jumping on the bandwagon, and they get mad at me when I say that our air is getting cleaner, because the activists want them to believe the opposite. But fortunately, with tier 3 fuels and tier 3 cars coming on board, our air will continue to get cleaner for the foreseeable future, which I think is a really good thing. And of course, COVID has done a great job of cleaning up our air, because a lot more people are staying home. So
yeah, it's definitely a plus for the state, for sure. Well, any last thoughts from either one of you before we wrap up?
Senator?
I just appreciate anyone's feedback. I'll give you my email address. It's just T Wyler, and I have this weird German spelling name, but it's T, then WEILER at le.utah.gov. I'd be happy to answer your questions or get any feedback that you have from today's presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, or just say thank you as well. It's always a good opportunity when I have it to talk solar or talk air quality. Again, really good things happening here, and I hope we are able to capitalize on the workforce that we have here, the opportunity that we have here with renewable energy. It's just a matter of finding that right balance between corporate customers, residential customers, and the state of Utah and our utility. And I think we have tremendous opportunity in the state, especially to put people back to work by investing and giving some certainty back into the policies that already exist here. And then we can look to expand those in the future. So thank you.
For sure.
Thank you both for joining us, and to our audience, thank you for tuning into Silicon Slopes Startup Capital, and tune in next time.